Fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to another episode of Tuesday Takes with Tre'Shon. He is Tre'Shon Diaz. I'm Kevin Knight here on the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. We're here to bring you an interesting topic, one of my favorites personally, which is I enjoy the cap, the salary cap, the machinations, the free agency, how to manage the business side of the roster. I've always found fascinating, and given that Tre'Shon just wrote like 2,000 words on that topic, I can tell that he also finds that fascinating. So we're gonna bring you guys a detailed look at the Falcons salary cap situation this offseason. It looks really dire if you look at like over the cap or Spotrac or anything like that. You're like, oh my god, they're like 13 million under the cap, like, you know, over the cap, and this is a disaster. And how are they like? It's not that dire, but it is. This is a very difficult year, and they kind of set themselves up for it with the Kirk Cousins contract. This was going to be the tight year. Next year, if they play their cards right, they could have more or less a clean slate to do whatever they want. But what they do this year, obviously, to sort of navigate the difficult situation that they're in, will have a big effect on next year's cap as well. And we'll get to that today. But before we do, Tre'Shon, how we doing?
Yeah, doing well. You know, the combine is only a couple weeks away at this point, and then the new league year is like less than a month away. So like we're really gonna get into, the exciting part of the off season, which is free agency. And it's never really quite too exciting over here. We had some excitement last year. Things got exciting, and we learned that excitement can be dangerous. So
Just I find that if you don't have dreams, then you're never disappointed, and it feels amazing. So, dodgeball
right.
reference to all the youngs out there, but yeah,
That's right. Keep the
but
expectations low, and you'll never be disappointed.
you'll never be disappointed. It's great, words to live by. But yeah, guys, we're gonna dive into this cap situation here in just a second. Real quick, want to bring you a word from our sponsor. First of all, BetOnline, guys. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in the year 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or first-time bettor, BetOnline's your ultimate game day companion with the largest selection of odds on everything from NBA, college basketball to the NHL and UFC. BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting source, even though the NFL, unfortunately, no longer in session. We're going to have to find other things to bet on, but no matter what, they've got three-pointers, they've got hat tricks, they've got odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win over on BetOnline. So what are you guys waiting for? Head on over to that website. It's betonline.ag and put in our promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV to get access to the latest promotions. BetOnline, the game starts here. And, of course, want to shout out Underdog Fantasy. I didn't win on Underdog Fantasy. I hope you guys did, I do still want to shout out the platform because, I could have adjusted the numbers down to win, and I decided to push it, and try to push my prize numbers even higher, but you don't have to do that. You can adjust it down and get the easy win, or play it, hard and fast, which is what I did. It didn't work out, but definitely check out Underdog Fantasy. If you're a big NBA player, they have all the NBA stuff. I wouldn't know what to do with it. I don't know really anything about it, but seeing as I didn't win anything when I did know what I was doing, maybe if I just picked random numbers, then maybe that would also have more of a victory chance for me. I don't know, but no matter what, guys, check out Underdog Fantasy with the simple pick'em style format. You just pick the players that you think will outperform expectations. You don't have to worry about the complexities of setting a lineup or even drafting DFS, although they do have those as well. And like I said, love the user-friendly interface. The community's fun. Make sure when you sign up to use our promo code BIRDS, that's BIRDS, like Dirty Birds and Brews, to get up to a $1,000 bonus cash offer and a free pick when you sign up over at Underdog Fantasy. Thanks again to those guys for sponsoring the show. All right. Tre'Shon. So, right off the top, you look at the Falcons cap space, it looks a little alarming. The Falcons do have 53 players on the roster, which, that is the number that you need. But effectively, they are 15.392 million, if you want to get technical, over the cap at this stage. Now, that's not necessarily alarming at this very moment because you don't have to be cap compliant until the league year begins, but this team, they have some work to do. And Basically, the short version is that the cap had been more or less fixed by Fontenot after the previous regime left it in absolute disaster mode. Uh, and now with the Kirk Cousins contract and trying to kind of win now last year, obviously that didn't work out. They're dealing with the repercussions of that and now having this negative cap situation. But the good news is I don't think the mess is as hard to clean up as it was last time. And also, we know that Fontenot has experience in cleaning up messes. So, how do you feel like, just from an overall perspective, how bad is the situation? Should fans be worried, or should they just expect a not overly active free agency period for the Falcons?
Yeah, I think the Falcons are in a situation in that their future could become dire if they experience a couple of missteps this offseason. I agree with you that we are not at a dire spot just yet. Things don't look great, but there is an avenue for them to be able to get through this offseason and set themselves up to be competitive in 2025 and then to be able to jump into free agency in future years, because that is something that you always have to think about. And to be honest, the timing of their restrained asset situation lines up kind of well, in my opinion. I'm not really too impressed with this free agency class. Like, there are some good players, but when you start talking about the best players that the Falcons can add, almost all of them require a trade. So in terms of like actual free agents, people who will be hitting the market, it does kind of work in Atlanta's favor that this isn't going to be one that you feel like you're going to be missing out on a ton of players. With that being said, it could make some players who maybe in a more robust market wouldn't be getting so sought after, a little bit harder to acquire at some of those positions that they want. But, it's going to come down to how all 32 teams operate and want to approach some of these different position groups, and if any of them are going to be in line for raises or market resets, what have you.
Yeah, and they have work to do, and like you said, it's not like it's not dire in that they don't have to. The Falcons, I think, last year didn't really pull any of the levers they could have if they really wanted to go like all in, quote unquote. And that was part of the reason I was never really like 100% sold on this like line they were spinning about, oh, we're trying to win now. It's like, well, you're really not like pushing your chips in like you would expect a team that thinks they're actually trying to win now would do. And they did make some moves late, obviously the Judon and Simmons trades, or the Judon trade and the Simmons signing, that kind of signaled more of that move, but those didn't really work out. Obviously the Judon trade was a swing and a miss. I think anyone that looks back at that deal and is like, oh, that was a terrible deal, like why would they do that, like I think you're just lying, because I don't remember anyone upset about the Judon deal when it happened. Like, and it's like, look, like every deal has risk. Not every deal will work. We could have traded for Judon and he could have hurt himself in camp, and then it's like, oh, well, was that a terrible trade? I mean, Terry Fontenot didn't have a crystal ball, so therefore it's like, there's plenty of things we can get on Fontenot about, mostly draft related, that like, you don't need to trash him about a trade that I think pretty much every Falcons fan and analyst was in favor of. It just didn't work out. The process
was approved. Everybody gave it its stamp of approval. And like you said, the drawback of that deal is always like he was going to hit a wall based on age. And that got accelerated by the GM, which is no longer here, and his positional coach, who is no longer here. So it's kind of like, like you said, you don't really have the ability to predict that happening.
Yeah. It's just something that it's just kind of in the back of your head, like, well, this could happen sometime. Hopefully it doesn't happen this year. But again, the long-term ramifications, we weren't going to draft anyone worthwhile with that third round pick anyway, like let's go look back at the third round picks, everyone. And you don't have to worry about that. So yeah.
I mean, honestly, when you make the argument, would a third round pick have gotten more? Would it Judon in the year with 4.5 sacks? Something like that?
Yeah, probably not. Yeah.
I Dallas Turner didn't even end the year with that many sacks. I think Latu didn't even end the year with that many sacks. So we're talking about third round guy who you would have gotten. So, at the end of the day, it kind of worked out from a production standpoint.
Yeah. No, I get people being upset with it, but yeah, it's like
Yeah,
that's one that it's just like, it's unfortunate, but there's plenty of other things you can be mad at Fontenot about that are legitimate that we don't have to. That was a good move. Yeah, we're gonna get into those right now. No, that we're gonna save that for the airing of grievances show. But yeah, that one it's unfortunate, but it is what it is. But the good news is they didn't extend him, so that deal really doesn't impact them going forward. They're free and clear from that. They got him on a 1-year rental. It didn't work out, but whatever. We ride. We move on. And that's kind of the same thing. Like the next sort of topic is Kirk Cousins, because that's obviously the albatross now. But even that deal, like, I think was structured very intelligently. I think they structured the deal well, again, to prevent catastrophe. Because if they had given Cousins what he wanted, or had tried to spread this guaranteed money out more to try to lower their cap hit this year, they'd be dealing with the repercussions of that contract into 2026 without question, and possibly even into 2027. As it stands now with Cousins' deal, like, there's not really any way to, unless you can trade him post June 1st, which again doesn't really help you a ton this year and pushes the money into next year, which you don't really want either. There's not really any way to save money on the Kirk Cousins deal. I know, like, that's the kind of the thing that everybody is looking at, like, oh, that's the biggest cap hit, so what do we do? Like, the best case scenario is you trade Kirk Cousins pre-June 1st, you get him off the books. You don't really save anything substantial. Maybe $2.5 million, right? I'm guessing Falcons probably will do like a simple restructure on Cousins to like convert that salary to like make it easier to trade him, so that it's kind of a wash on the deal, like to make that deal happen if that were to happen. But that's really the only savings I think you could reasonably see from Kirk Cousins. So that one's, you're not getting that. The savings would be next year, right? If you can pull off that pre-June 1st trade, you don't save much at all this year, but you save everything next year. I mean, $60 million, right? So that's obviously massive. So that would be nice, but that's more of a future thing with Cousins. So moving on from there, it's we have to come up with at least $15 million to sign the draft class and get under the cap. And yeah, I know in your article you touched on a bunch of the restructure candidates. Obviously, there are a few cut candidates as well, and we'll probably talk about a few true extension candidates that we could get into. That with an extension, you can also create cap space. And assuming the player is still good, you're not really hurting yourself the way you can do with the restructure too. So they do have levers to pull, and they're probably going to have to pull more of them this year. Is kind of the short version. But yeah.
Yeah. And I will say about Kirk, something that I found while doing some research that changed some of my opinion on his cut or trade status has to do with the March 17th date. So if Kirk Cousins is still on the roster on March 17th, he is going to get a $10 million bonus that is going to be applied to 2026. And so because of that, I am a little bit more on I think they're going to cut Kirk Cousins side of things, but I think he is going to be, they're only allowed to have two. He's going to be looked at as their designated post June 1st cut. And what this does is it actually allows the team, even though they have to carry his cap number all the way through that June date, and it still won't get applied till next year, the savings, like you said earlier, it actually allows them to not have to pay that March bonus. You don't have to pay that roster bonus. And so that is another aspect of savings for their future cap health. You'll avoid having to pay that $10 million bonus. And then you are obviously you don't get anything out of Cousins, but the difference between a post June 1st cut and a trade pre June 1st is about 2.5 million in savings in terms of dead cap. So you only get 2.5 million if you pull off that trade. And what over the cap isn't able to show us right now is that this is before the 10 million bonus kicks in. So if you apply the 10 million bonus and you miss that March 17th deadline, that will be affected into next year's cap situation. And so it's definitely added some layers to the Kirk Cousins scenario. And it's going to be interesting to see what they do. I think now you almost want to get a trade done before the 17th, because if not, then you're having to negotiate that bonus and say have the other team take that on and so on and so forth. So a lot of interesting things can happen with Kirk's situation. And unfortunately, I'm kind of not the path to a trade has kind of become a little bit more difficult to me, but doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Yeah. That's the kicker, is that the you if you hold him through that March 17th deadline, you can't cut him until next year, basically. So you're either going to cut him before March 17th, or you're going to hold him and hope to trade him. And the benefit of the trade obviously is that he's gone from the books entirely this year. You don't really save anything significant either way. Now, if you do like a post June 1st trade, yeah, you can save more money this year, but it's like that would be later, like much later in the process. But yeah, it's like if they want to trade him, they're gonna have to hold him more than likely, because people are gonna believe that they'll cut him. So, you know, and the team trading for him is gonna have to pay that bonus. But that's really the only guaranteed money he'd have in 2026. So, they'd be basically trading for 27.5 million in 2025 and 10 million in 2026. So it really just depends on how dire the quarterback situation is. That's why I sort of think the biggest ticket to trading him is just holding him through camp and just waiting for the inevitable injury or injuries to happen, because someone will need a quarterback. Like sooner or later, someone will need a quarterback, but you have to play chicken. Because teams aren't going to trade, like you said. It would be awesome to trade him before March 17th. That would be ideal for everyone. But no one's going to do it, because they know if they just wait, the Falcons will probably cut him. So if the Falcons want to trade him, they're going to have to hold him. And it's this whole, chicken situation. And there's also the fact that they're going to have to find a new backup quarterback if they do cut him. Because they're not going to get any cap savings, and they're going to have to go find another backup quarterback. That's going to have to be another free agency addition, more than likely. So,
and that's late in the process too, if you're holding him as well. And the biggest, like you said, the biggest benefit to that trade is that they would get so much cap relief for 2025 if they do that post-June trade, versus they get no cap relief. They're taking on 40 million in dead cap in 25, but they get the same cap spread and relief for 26 and 27, which would be 12.5 dead cap, but 45 million in cap savings. So the post June 1st deadline, whether it is trade or whether it is a cut or what have you, definitely seems like where they want to operate and manage and kind of make the decisions on his deal. And we're going to find out, I think, pretty quickly here, like what they want to do with that.
Yeah, I think it'll be the first domino, more or less, that they'll either hold him or not, and that'll give us something. But in terms of the cap, like more than likely we won't see an impact from the Kirk Cousins move until 2026. But the move, it will be significant in 2026 for sure. There'll be a lot of savings regardless. So really it's just, it's the gamble of do you risk that extra 10 million bonus in 2026 to potentially save the 27.5 this year, because if you trade him this year, you can save that base salary by trading it to someone else. So it's kind of risk 27.5 to save 10, or vice versa. And I'm really curious to see how it plays out, because I think it's one of those things that I think teams would be really nervous to do it, but I think also the chance of trading him is pretty high if you're just patient. Because we know what's going to happen. Quarterbacks are going to get hurt. Somebody's going to get hurt. There's 32 starting quarterbacks. They're not all going to make it through training camp and preseason healthy. Someone's going to need Kirk Cousins sooner or later. But can you diamond hands Kirk Cousins, or are you gonna just try to get him out of your building? Fontenot would earn a lot of points in my book if they're willing to roll the dice on Cousins and navigate that situation, because I think also like you may be able to actually get not like a big pick, but you may be able to get like a fifth or something instead of like a seventh pick swap, which is probably what you're not getting any significant draft compensation for Kirk Cousins if you trade him before, the 17th deadline. You're basically just pick swapping probably with somebody just to facilitate the deal. But if you wait till someone needs him in an emergency, or two people need him in an emergency, then all of a sudden, it's gonna be fascinating to see what happens. More than likely, you're right, and he just gets cut, and it ruins the whole suspense. It's just like, oh yeah, Kirk Cousins was cut. Oh yeah, whatever. But it'll be fascinating if they do hold him. Which is probably why it won't happen, because this team doesn't usually do that type of stuff. But I would be impressed. And I know the team craves my approval, clearly. So, yeah. All right. Well, that's the biggest domino, but again, in a weird way, doesn't really have that much impact on 2025's cap, but maybe the biggest overall domino, and certainly the one that most people would be talking about.
And I think that's what Terry was trying to say in his presser, but just bad timing. And not the greatest delivery.
Yeah.
Like ultimately, this is what he was trying to say when he was like, we've already accounted for that money. It just, timing is everything.
Yeah. And that's the other side of the coin with Cousins. And I did a whole episode on Cousins, guys. If you want to hear more Cousins talk, we're going to move on here in a second. But, the money's gone. Like, your money is gone. Like, whether you keep Cousins or not, the only way to actually save significant cap is to trade him. So, there's another angle that's just like if Fontenot's telling the truth, shocker, then maybe they really have just budgeted for Kirk Cousins to be here, and they're comfortable with him being the backup, as Fontenot said. Because either you're not really getting, like, unless you trade him, the money's gone. You're either paying him to be your backup here, or you're paying him to be someone else's starter, because they're gonna, if he gets cut, someone's giving him a pittance to play for them. So, I'm really curious to see how it plays out. But yeah, you mentioned, there's a number of. We'll start with the cuts because those are the simplest. There's actually not that many compelling cuts. That's usually the quickest and easiest way to cap savings. The one you touched on mostly in your article was David Onyemata, and I think that one's kind of a done deal. And probably they're gonna do it, immediately because they need the space. And that, and guys, right there, that's a little over $8 million just in your pocket. So you're halfway there with just that one cut. And yeah, do you sort of think we're probably just gonna see him let go?
Yeah, I talked about it in the article, but like he's an interesting one to look at from like do you do a pre-June 1st or a post-June 1st? And it's like, what do you value? What do you need? I think, like you said, that they're gonna do this one immediately. It's the difference of about $2.4 million in savings, which is like, like a nice chunk of change for sure. But if they want to partake in free agency and like actually be able to jump in, that's going to be one of the easiest moves and quickest ways to do so. And it just kind of makes sense. They renegotiated his contract mid-season, which means he's actually ineligible for the early post-June 1st designation that we were talking about with Cousins. So it really doesn't make a ton of sense to hold on to him at all at that point if you're just going to cut him for the extra $2 million, because like you said with Cousins, that doesn't get applied until next year. So you're not really getting the full benefit of like doing that move, because you don't get to touch any of that money until June 2nd. And free agencies happened. It does help with signing the draft class. And like, that's kind of where like the Onyemata money could be valued and whatnot. But again, since they don't have the ability to do that early designation, which means they can't start engaging in free agency with somebody else at his position, maybe like they would like to, or kind of be able to feel out that market as well. It just makes the most sense that they would kind of take the $8 million and then look at the other options that they can go through to get more instant money.
Yeah, I agree. So I think Onyemata is probably the most likely to just be cut immediately. I know Caden Ellis was like kind of a hot name early, but it seems very unlikely they're going to move on from him given how strong he finished and that linebacker is a barren wasteland without Caden Ellis. So that one's not really likely. I don't like. I don't really think there's many other compelling ones. I think the main one to circle would be Grady Jarrett, which is the most painful cut of all. I kind of don't believe it that they would do it. I feel like they would try to negotiate an extension and a pay cut, basically, given his age and sort of decline in play. And I would think Jarrett would probably be open to that, but the difference like that's going to decide it is like how big of a pay cut is he going to take, because like he'd probably need to go down to like 10 million a year or lower to stick around. But again, if they do just elect to cut him, 16.2, your cap problems are they're not solved, but like you're under the cap if you make that one cut. It would destroy my soul to cut Grady Jarrett. So I hope they can find a way to get around it, but that's probably the other easy one that you can save a ton of money from, and they may be forced into doing that even if they don't want to, given again the difficulties here. The other one would be like Younghoe Koo, but again I think that one's probably like a post preseason cut. Like if he struggles, you could save $3 million if you cut him before the season there. Well, I guess it would maybe even be a little bit more at that point, but.
A Koo cut post June 1st nets you 4.25.
Yeah.
Pre-June gets you 3. So it definitely makes sense to hold on to him, do the camp battle, and then let the chips fall however they do. The other player who people will see offers like in that pre-June category of cuts, offers a ton of money, is Caleb McGarry. They're going to see the $14 million figure. You will not be able to find a player as good as Caleb McGarry for $14 million. And so that's like, you can find somebody who's giving you the current play level of Grady Jarrett for 16.25. You can probably find that for about $8 million based on what we're getting out of the player right now. But Caleb, you just can't really replace him at this time. And then if you go the draft route, then you're doing a rookie blindside tackle for your second year, really like, his first full year starting quarterback. So I get it. I know McGarry has, he's very volatile in terms of how he's viewed. But I just don't see that one happening either.
Yeah, no. If anything, I think McGarry's in the extension bucket.
I do think he is going to be in that extension group.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll get to that very shortly. The only other like easy lever they could pull here is probably a Kyle Pitts trade. That because it's the 5th-year option, it's just a straight up 1-year deal, $10.87 million in savings. So that's another reason they could consider the Kyle Pitts trade, is because you do save a lot, and you're likely to get, I think, a day 2 pick out of it. So if they don't feel like he's going to provide that return on investment for them, which I could see that, considering that they just really don't seem to be able to figure out a way to make him work in this offense. Maybe Zach Robinson again with another year to kind of get his feet under him can actually craft a role for Pitts. And certainly he's a better match for Michael Penix than he was for any of the other quarterbacks that he's had here other than Matt Ryan during his career. But, they may just, again, be like, we need this money and we need this day 2 pick real bad. So we're going to go ahead and do this. But yeah, those are kind of the only easy button ones. But I know you mentioned restructures a lot in your article. So who are some guys you think would be great candidates for that at this point to free up some cash?
Yeah, so there's simple restructures and there's maximum restructures. And so simple restructures are just basically turning existing guaranteed salary into a prorated signing bonus. You're just moving around the money that you currently have, and that conversion basically lowers the cap hit just due to how the money is now distributed. A max restructure is basically viewed as like a extension of sorts. So somebody like Grady Jarrett would make a lot of sense for a max restructure. And so what that entails could be something like they keep his current salary, but they distribute it out through void years, which keeps him under contract longer. And so the difference between that and cutting Jarrett, if you cut Jarrett, you get the $16 million. If you go this max restructure route, you get 11 million. So there is like an avenue to Grady Jarrett staying on the team. It's basically taking a pay cut because he's going to extend his contract without getting a raise. So again, like you were saying earlier, that's going to have to be a decision he's comfortable with making, and the team can't just make that happen without his consent. But looking at a player that they could do that with in terms of a simple restructure, Darnell Mooney seems like the easiest candidate to me. One, like simple restructures are basically bonuses. They're giving you this money that you're going to earn at the end. And if like anybody earned a bonus with their performance last year, is Darnell Mooney. He's already like, I would say, underpaid based on like the production he got. And if he's able to like continue, then this could also be looked at as a move of goodwill. Like, hey man, we really appreciate what you've been doing. We're going to give you this money early, and let's get going on an extension talk, making things better in the future in terms of the relationship he has with the team. Those are the kind of things that like can make the big difference for a player, and they want to stick around and they feel like this team really values them or not. So he's somebody that I would like to see fall into that category. Out of the O-line contracts between Lindstrom's and Matthews, I do not want to touch Jake Matthews' contract anymore. It has been the like restructure contract that they go to every year. And I think Lindstrom's contract is going to take over that role now. And so like, I wouldn't mind them carving out some money from Chris's contract. We obviously don't want to carve out too much because that's kind of where you get into trouble, like what happened with Thomas. And then like with the Saints, you see magnified. They have done so many max restructures that they're stuck in a restructure cycle. With Chris, he's got about 10 million. You could carve out maybe half, maybe even 3 to 4, just kind of depending on what you need. But I wouldn't want to see them go too deep into that well, just because you want to be able to go back to it in case of emergency or anything else like that later. And it's one of your biggest year-to-year cap hits and cap numbers.
Exactly. And you touched on a good point, which is the guys you want to push the money forward on are the young stars. Chris Lindstrom's going to be 28 this year. You can push, and he's an offensive lineman. You could push that money. You're good. Like you're feeling confident. Chris Lindstrom through 32. No problems. And that's kind of like now that Jake Matthews is kind of getting to the end of that cycle where, okay, going into, you know, that age 32, 33 season, we don't really want to keep pushing this money anymore. We need to just start paying him straight up because we don't know when it could turn. Now, some tackles, Jason Peters is a great example. Play until they're 40. You know, now Peters isn't really a starter anymore, but he's still playing. And, you know, Peters was a starter into his late 30s. Some guys are like that. Jake Matthews strikes me as the type of tackle who could have that type of
His
career.
dad could.
His dad did, and he's been an absolute Iron Man, so he very well could have an extremely long career. Even so, you don't really want to push it with that contract. So, like you said, I think Lindstrom is a perfect example of a guy, but you don't need to max it out. Like that's when you really get into trouble. Like you can max it out and get 10 million and feel great, you know, today, but you probably don't want to do that because it's going to make his contract ridiculous in the future. And you don't really want to do that. You want to kind of push the restructures out to kind of give their contract like a raise, like commensurate with how the NFL contracts are kind of going up. I think that's the best way to sort of stack them. But Lindstrom is a great one. And again, if you even do half, which you can get 5 million out of that.
And then you combo that with Mooney and you've got 10 million.
Yep,
and the other thing I like about Mooney is that you can take advantage of his contract later, because if you do push that money off, well, then now you do the extension and then you can move that money that you put down the road and you can do the spread even better for a future deal. So, and I think extensions is where you want to go next.
Yeah. And I would say AJ Terrell could be a candidate too, just because he just signed. And again, and that's another almost 10 million. And you don't need to go all the way, but you could just do a little bit. You know, you could do 3 to 4 million if you need extra cash, and add a little bit more on top. And again, because you're sort of thinking he's only making 19 mil, only, you know. And I know some people think that AJ Terrell's not worth that money, guys. I don't know what you were watching last year. Like AJ Terrell's like very, very good. Like, I mean, I don't know. I feel like corner's one of those positions. It's like, and I don't mean this pejoratively, folks, but like the average fan, I think, kind of has a hard time determining corner value because everyone just remembers when they get cooked, and it's like, well, every corner gets cooked. I watched Sauce Gardner get cooked a bunch of times last year. Okay, like it happens. It happens to everybody. The receivers in this league are too damn good. Okay, like it's just like it's gonna happen. You want the guy that just gets cooked less, and that's definitely Terrell. Just don't let him single up on Mike Evans. That's really the only one.
Hey, he beat the Mike Evans charges
He
his
did.
past couple of
He
years.
did. Yeah.
Go check those
This
box
year,
scores.
but this year in particular was a great job. But yeah, so that's another one you could consider. And then the other option is the extensions. We already mentioned Caleb McGarry. Again, I think this was his kind of prove it 2 years. It was like, okay, we're gonna give you a short extension. It's kind of been not as good as we've hoped, but also it's been pretty good. But the last 2 years, I think it's like, okay, it's what we wanted. You've earned it. Let's give him an extension. And I think we can stop playing around with Caleb McGarry. He's a good right tackle, okay? He's not the best pass protector. He's perfectly fine. And he's a great run blocker. You're going to have a really hard time upgrading Caleb McGarry. It is what it is. So I think you give him a 3-year extension. You don't and again, you don't have to maximize the savings from that. Like when you extend, you can like really minimize his base salary this year and push that money out. You don't have to add void years or do anything crazy, but you could get up to 10.6 from an extension. You probably shouldn't go that hard, but again, half of that, chop his cap hit down to like 9 million or something, save 5 or 6 million on the cap, and keep him in here for 3 more years and basically keep the band together on the offensive line. And sooner or later, you're going to have to take a developmental tackle. Probably can't do it this year either, but next year probably should be doing it. But that's a good one. And then the other one I really circled was Jesse Bates as an extension candidate. 2026 is the last year. Again, you're looking at these guys in that prime window. 28 is a great time to sort of give another 4-year deal because then you're looking at 32 as the end point and kind of seeing, okay, where are we at? And again, they don't need to maximize it, but with Bates, they can also get up to 10 million back. Is there any other guys that you were looking at or those two in particular? Or?
Yeah, I like the Caleb one. I think you could do a 2-year extension with some protection for that final year, kind of similar to what they did now. Yeah, they're going to have to eventually get a developmental tackle or get a tackle or something in the building just with him and with Jake aging. But developmental means not ready immediately. So you do kind of need to be prepared for a camp battle situation. And then if Caleb wins out or whatever, then at least you have like a good option to start with. Bates was another one. His contract is like already was kind of again set up for like that final year to kind of be like, okay, like maybe this is when you go. There's like a roster bonus that kicks in like on March 19th of that new league year if he's still here. So I think you can get creative with him, and you can probably look at like, again, a similar kind of 2-year extension that would really, I think, kind of lock him up as a Falcon for life, whether it's 2 or 3. It would be cool to see Bates kind of here till 2028, 2029. I think the other extension I was thinking about was Caden Ellis. And so like we had this conversation about like he looked like he could have been a cut candidate. Like that's what his contract was set up for, was this 3rd year to kind of be that decision. And I think you can probably just based on the result, get a pretty decent deal for him that kind of keeps him around again for like maybe an extra 2 years or something like that. We know Caden isn't a traditional inside linebacker, but I think the skill set that he brings has value, and it's one that they can still kind of get value out of for a few years. So he was probably the other one. And then there was one other person that I thought, a simple one, like, hey, like, like if you want to commit to Ray McLeod and throw him a raise and basically do a 1-year extension with him. I know a lot of people are thinking about, well, what about bringing Rondale Moore back? I just don't really know if it's in the cards at this point. It kind of seems like it would be really tough to lean on him as somebody that you want to put like, a lot of faith in going into next year. Whereas with Ray, you feel good because he has that legit wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 ability. And then if they did add a receiver via draft or something else, you've got special teams return value out of him. So he's somebody where I'm like, hey, that's like almost $4 million that you can kind of get from a Ray McLeod. Is that correct? Wait, let me double check. My slider here was off. Oh, okay. It's only about $2 million in savings, so maybe not like running.
It's not huge, but it can add up. Yeah, it can add up for sure.
It helps. And Ellis's is like $3 million. So these are just kind of little things to help you get a little bit more aggressive without, I think, totally like, wrecking your future cap situation, because these are players that shouldn't cost you a lot of money.
Exactly. Yeah. And sort of like, summing up all these moves, guys, like if they do everything that we said, they could get 50 million in cap space. Like, I mean, like, I don't think that they should. I think they need to be a little bit more restrained than that and probably not push it to that limit. But still, like, even if they kind of moderate it a bit and they could get to 30. They could free up 30 million. That would give them, or maybe 35 million. That would give them like 20 million to play with in free agency. That's enough to sign a few mid-range guys. That covers the draft class and everything too. That would get them to a point where they can operate, make a few mid-range additions, maybe one big addition. Especially, with the new signings, you can sign them really cheap the first year if you're signing a multi-year deal. So they can squeeze guys in. It's just going to make it more difficult in the future. But as you guys can see, like, this isn't like, oh, we need to do all this and then we'll barely be able to like operate. It's like, no, like they can make the moves that Tre'Shon and I suggested, get to a point where they can make some moves, have some flexibility without compromising the future entirely. If they want to go crazy and get 50 million to spend, they're going to have to like Saints it up here. And I don't think either of us want that. So, but yeah, I think this is a good primer. You guys can see that they have options. It's not as dire as it appears. It is tight. They do have to be careful. And there's going to be some needle threading going on here and some moves to consider. Maybe some tough decisions to be made with Grady Jarrett, Kyle Pitts, etc. But as you guys can see, they have options. And we wanted to bring that to you. Also, check out Tre'Shon's article if you want to get more of the nitty-gritty, more of the details on the differences between those types of restructures and all that. Make sure to check that out. But yeah, I think we covered it pretty well, Tre'Shon. Anything else you want to touch on real quick before we sign off?
Yeah, I think the only other domino we didn't talk about that's going to influence their early moves is Drew Dahlman. And so if they're able to get something done, I think in-house before he's in that period, before he hits the market and they're allowed to negotiate with him, whatever kind of numbers we see or look like, that will kind of give us an idea of, okay, how much space do they need to free up in order to complete this signing, like at the actual start of the new league year? And that's another good thing to pay attention to kind of let you understand, okay, the situation and how it's going. If he does go to market, I'd be a little worried.
Can't let that happen. Yeah.
Not going to panic. I don't think they're going to let it happen. But if he does go to market, then it would just tell me that Dahlman's management is very aware of the Falcons cap situation and that he might be able to do some center market resetting. The center market is very interesting. It's one of the most undervalued positions in the league right now. And it's one that like I've just been keeping an eye on to kind of see if it's in line for a positional pay raise, or maybe they'll hear like, hey, the Falcons offer of 9 to 10 million is what you're going to get elsewhere. And, you have, comfort level here, et cetera, et cetera. You love Dwayne Ledford. Why would you leave him? So, I'm with you. I don't think they let him leave the building, but those numbers will tell us a lot about like who and all these other moves we talked about today kind of seem realistic and what could happen.
Yeah. I think the Dahlman extension might actually be the first domino even before the Kirk Cousins thing.
This is good. Yeah.
And like, I think Atlanta will offer 12 to 13 if they have to get it done. The only thing that mediates his number is the injury, right?
Yeah, and
Missed
there's,
half the season with injury, so
and there's a
that's
history
probably
there.
that's probably the saving grace that's going to keep him from being too aggressive in testing free agency, and also like obviously the fit in Atlanta is great. The offense is really tailored to him, and I think he's probably going to want to stick around. So that should help. It always helps, if the free agents want to play here. But I think that the Falcons will be able to get it done, but it's probably not going to be cheap, and that's going to inform a lot. So, yeah, guys, thanks so much for joining us. Again, check out Tre'Shon's article on thefalcoholic.com. He's at Trey3Sean here on the Twitters. And what's the new one on Blue Skies? Just Tre'Shon.io?
Tre'Shon.io.
Nice.
We'll also take you to the website that pulls together all the content like this, the articles and everything. One-stop shop. There's posters on there you can download, other things like that. So for free. So go check it out.
Check it out, guys. And I'm Kevin Knight at Falcoholic Kevin. Please like, subscribe, leave us your comments. What do you guys think about the Falcons cap situation? What moves would you make? How hard are you pushing it? And your job's not on the line, so you can get as crazy as you want with your suggestions. But thanks for watching, guys. Really appreciate you. Check out the Patreon if you want to support the show, patreon.com/FalcoholicLive, or sign up for the channel memberships here on YouTube if you're more of that video enjoyer. Thanks again to BetOnline and Underdog Fantasy for sponsoring today's episode. We will see you guys next time. We'll be joined by Joe Patrick on Wednesday night on Falcoholic Live to get into some more off-season talk. Until next time, guys, thanks for joining us here on the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. We'll see you. Have a good day.